to the recognizing Dr. Soumya Swaminathan. Soumya Swaminathan is an Indian pediatrician and a clinical scientist known for her research on tuberculosis and HIV. Dr. Soumya Swaminathan served as the Secretary to the Government of India for Health Research and Director General of the Indian Council of Medical Research during 2015-2017, where she prioritized evidence-based health policy, research capacity building in medical schools, and strengthening South-South partnerships in health sciences. From October 2017 to March 2019, she was the Deputy Director General of the program at the World Health Organization. Subsequently, till 2022, she served as the Chief Scientist at the World Health Organization under the leadership of Director General of World Health Organization. Soumya Swaminathan was born in Chennai. She is the daughter of father of Green Revolution of India, the most respected M.S. Swaminathan, and Indian educationalist Meena Swaminathan. Swaminathan received an MBBS from the Armed Forces Medical College in Pune and went on to pursue her MD in Pediatrics from All India Institute of Medical Science, New Delhi. Presently, she is the chairperson of M.S. Swaminathan Research Foundation. On behalf of Pinarayi Peruma 2025, on behalf of Peruma Talks 2025, we cordially welcome you to this Peruma Talk session. We have moderator Dr. Shaijas P., an eminent consultant gynecologist of Kannur Institute of Medical Science and Technology, a consultant in IVF specialist, and he was the national chairperson of Midlife Management Committee, and he has his MBBS and post-graduation from Jimmer Institute of Pondicherry. And apart from his medical profession, he is a seated badminton player, he is a singer and a dancer. He was a drummer in the music band with the world-renowned keyboardist Stephen Devasya, a multifaceted doctor. On behalf of Pinarayi Peruma Talks 2025, on behalf of all of you, we welcome to the Peruma Talks 2025. Thank you. We have 3 panel of judges to select the best questioner of the session, and we have Dr. C.V. Jayasri as one of the panelists, and we have Sri M. Surendra Babu as one of the panelists, and Sri M. Suresh Babu, convener of the panelists. On behalf of Peruma Talks 2025, we welcome you to the Peruma Talks session. Before moving on to the session, we have a special request to all the esteemed participants gathered here. Please keep your cell phone switched off or in silent mode until the whole session is over. We also request you to be in your respective seats until the end of the session. This will ensure minimum movements and less disturbances inside the auditorium. The session has 2 segments. Segment 1 is the erudite talk by the chief guest, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan. And segment 2 is the open interactive session where the audience can raise questions and get informed. Responses from the speaker. Please ensure perfect silence and less movements inside the auditorium during both the segments of the session. Let us enjoy the session and go home with enriched minds and hearts. Thank you. Over to the moderator, Dr. Shaijas P.
Such a pleasure. നിങ്ങളെല്ലാവരെയും കാണാൻ പറ്റിയതിലുള്ള സന്തോഷം. And such a pleasure to moderate the session by such an eminent speaker. I think, as already suggested, I think she has been a champion figure as far as research, clinical research is concerned in the country. So it's always a privilege to meet you, madam, and to moderate this session. Now, without wasting any more time, because madam needs to catch a flight, we will move on to madam's session. Over to you, madam.
Okay, so I just have to ask for the next slide and he will do it. Namaskaram and a very good evening. Let me firstly thank profusely the organizers of Pinnarai Peruma for inviting me here today. It's a beautiful environment and a beautiful convention center, and very, very impressive to see that, you know, Panchayat has built such a wonderful facilities here. Only in Kerala, I think you can see such a thing. So I know that every day, you know, different topics have been covered by different speakers, and it was suggested that I may speak on One Health. I thought it's a good idea. It's something which many people are getting more interested in now. So I first want to know how many people have heard of One Health, this term. Okay, there's 1, 2, maybe 3 people who have heard of One Health. So maybe younger students who are here, what do you think it could be, One Health? When we say the word One Health, what is it that comes to mind? Pardon? Interconnected, yes. So what all is interconnected? So it is animals, humans, environment, right? So it is also called planetary health, eco-health. Many words have been used actually to describe One Health, but One Health has become more popular. So what I want to do is, can we go to the slideshow? Is to give you an overview of One Health and what are the concepts, why is it important. It's also very much connected with climate change now. And you know, they mentioned in the introduction that I was a chief scientist in the World Health Organization. During COVID-19, I was over there. And so one of the things I realized is, why did we get a pandemic like COVID? And why do we get these outbreaks? Sometimes we are talking about H5N1, H1N1, of course Nipah. There are some re-emerging infections also, some new, but many known infections, right? So SARS-CoV-2 was a new virus, first time in human beings. That is why it became a pandemic, because we didn't have any immunity. So it was able to spread. But influenza viruses have been there for a very long time with human beings. But still we get outbreaks, epidemics, pandemics. Why? Because the influenza virus keeps on mutating, it keeps on changing. And so even if we have had it before, what happens is that again, when we are exposed to a slightly different strain, we don't have immunity, so we get sick. And so you will hear people saying, I got the flu, I got the flu. So influenza viruses and other respiratory viruses, they keep changing. So one thing is very clear, is that pandemics will occur more frequently in the future. If you look at the history of the 20th century, and now of course we are in 21st century, the number of infections which have come from animals to humans has been increasing. Why? It is important to try to understand why we have more of this, because zoonotic infections which come from animals to humans has been there from historic, prehistoric times. But in the last 50 to 100 years, why it is becoming more frequent? I think you can guess some of the answers. Maybe you think about that, we'll ask you.
Prefer a free mic so that it gives you a little bit more freedom.
Yeah, okay, sure. Yes, thank you. So this graph, actually what it is showing is, this line, the blue line is showing the increase in heat-related deaths amongst people over 65 years. And you can see in the last 10 to 15 years how rapidly that graph is going up. Next. Now, this is something called the global burden of disease. They do a ranking of risk factors of health. And every few years they repeat this exercise. If you look at the ranking in the 1990s, you'll find that things like low birth weight, underweight, wasting, prematurity, and dietary patterns, these are all high risk. If you look at the purple colored ones, if you look at 2021, you'll find that the blue colored factors have increased in number. That is the environmental risk factors. What are they? They are air pollution, ambient air pollution, as well as household air pollution. Then things like lead and other heavy metal poisonings, unsafe water and sanitation, of course. These are all things which are environmental risk factors. So those are actually increasing. But also you can see the metabolic risk factors, again very relevant for Kerala. You can see high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high body mass index means obesity, high cholesterol, kidney. These are all increasing also as risk factors. And many of those are due to our diet and our activity patterns. So on the one side we have climate change, on the other side we have more of environmental risks. And if you see, WHO says that if you look at all the deaths which occur globally, 23%, almost 1/4, are because of environmental risk factors, both in old people and in young people, children under 5. So, climate change can cause health risks in many ways. You can see in the middle, extreme weather events, everybody we have experienced now. Cyclonic storms are becoming more frequent, exceedingly heavy rainfall. 3 months rain comes in 24 hours. Then at the same time you have drought, you have heat, you have sea level rise. Our coast is becoming eroded. The sea level is rising. And vectors like mosquitoes, ticks, they are all changing their patterns. Earlier we never used to have malaria in certain parts of the country. Now we see malaria. The collector of Nilgiris, Ooty, was telling me that he now sees dengue in Ooty. The malaria, the dengue mosquito never used to survive in that temperature. Now it is so warm, even in the mountains, the mosquitoes are able to survive. So climate change can have a direct impact, like we get exposed to heat, we become sick, we get heat stroke, but indirectly it can impact us through the influence on these insects, vectors, but also through the food production system. You get unseasonal rainfall, you will lose your crops. You get prolonged drought, you're going to lose your crops. It is predicted that by 2050, the output of yield of wheat and rice will go down significantly because of the heat. Already in the north, many farmers are now sowing their wheat, winter wheat, earlier because of the heat stroke that is coming, heat wave is coming even in March. That's a normal time when the wheat used to ripen and they would harvest it in April. Now they find that they have to advance the harvesting. So many things are changing and we have to also adapt ourselves to those changes. But climate change does not affect everybody in the same way. There are certain people who may be more vulnerable. The poorer sections of the population, the extremes of age, very young and very old, cannot tolerate. Health system capacity, equity, you know, how good are our systems, how good is the health system in reaching out to everybody. And at the same time, the exposures which occur also vary, you know, if you're, depends on the housing, what kind of infrastructure do you have air conditioning or not, do you have cooling, is your house well ventilated, do you live in a rural or an urban environment. So many things make a difference, but the ultimate impact is on health outcomes. And so many of the diseases that, you know, we thought we had controlled, infectious diseases, communicable diseases. In fact, there was a Surgeon General of the US called Everett Koop, and in 1971, he said that the era of infectious diseases is over. We have conquered, the bacteria and the viruses. So because antibiotics had been discovered and they were doing a good job, and so the belief was man has won over the microbes, but that was obviously not correct. Next slide. So there's a mapping that was done. Of course, this keeps getting revised, but essentially what is clear is that almost everywhere in India, except perhaps few districts, are vulnerable to climate change. They could be vulnerable in different ways. If you're living along the coast, then you're vulnerable to, of course, sea level rise, but also to cyclonic storms and floods. And if you are in the central part of the country, then drought is increasing. The western part, which used to be desert, Rajasthan, is now getting a lot of rain, which means, again, the malaria and such diseases are coming back. And if you look at the last 10 years, the number of heat wave days has gone up. And especially if you see the exposure numbers, number of days to which people are exposed to heat has gone up. So this video, we may not play the whole thing, but essentially this is from last year's television channels, which were showing a lot of, we all saw people suffering from heat, getting admitted in the hospitals. Hospitals are not prepared. They could not cope, and there are a lot of fatalities which occurred in many districts, especially in the northern part of India. Next. So heat affects not only humans, but it also affects obviously the crops, like we were saying, as well as it affects animals. So what the MS Swaminathan Research Foundation has done now for many years is take the IMD weather data, but then convert that into a kind of advisory for the public, which will give them advice on what they can do to protect themselves, but also the livestock, the poultry, and the crops. So because we know that for many of our rural communities, the livestock and the poultry are very important. So if those animals die, then their livelihood suffers. So definitely they need to keep them safe. And this is going to be very important now going forward. How do you keep your animals safe? And also how do you start thinking about the crops? Which crops to grow? This is a very fundamental question that will need to be asked. Because in certain places which are used to growing rice, may no longer be able to do that in the future. Or some certain crops which need a lot of water may not be able to continue in the future. So that kind of thinking and planning really needs to be done. And now what we are planning is, based on the experience through agriculture and veterinary, we are also now extending it to humans. So we now have a program with the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, where we will take the weather advisories and use artificial intelligence to be able to predict what the weather is going to be like in the next 10 days or 14 days. So give advanced weather prediction so that communities, panchayats, community leaders, as well as the health workers can prepare themselves. If you know that you're going to have a prolonged heat spell, then you can prepare yourself better. Now, of course, we think of ourselves as evolved species, as being at the top of, the pyramid, etc. We have a reasoning capacity, and so we think we are very superior, but actually if you look at it, we are very much dependent on all the other species also for our life. We cannot survive on this planet if we wipe out other species, and the worrying thing is that today the rate at which species are becoming extinct is far higher than it used to be in the past, and that is because of humans. It is what is called anthropogenic. We live in the Anthropocene, which is that human beings today have more impact on the planet than any natural factor. And that is for the last 70 or 80 odd years that we have been in the Anthropocene. So our actions are driving other species becoming extinct. And sometimes you don't realize, you think, okay, so what if some butterflies become extinct, or some bird becomes extinct? How does it matter? But when you actually look at case studies like the vultures, you know that in India, practically all our vultures have been lost. Why? Does anyone know why all the vultures died? You're a veterinary? No. She knows all the answers. So there's a drug called diclofenac, which is an anti-inflammatory drug, which is given to cattle. That diclofenac is fatal for vultures. So when cattle is given that medicine and the cattle dies, you know that vultures feed on carcasses. They develop a bleeding, internal bleeding, and they die. 99% of our vulture population is gone. Now certain states are trying to repopulate and rewild the vultures. But if you lose 99% of, it's not easy. So what happens? No vultures means nobody to dispose the carcass of dead animals. Normally the vultures would be the ones who will come and clean up the carcass. You won't even see. Now animals die, wild animals or other animals, the carcass will be lying there and rotting and a lot of other infections. Then the dogs will go and eat it. This is how they have shown that the number of infections spreading because of this lack of vultures to clear the carcasses means that humans now have to make some arrangements to clear those carcasses, especially of the wild animals. So similarly, we are losing pollinators. Pollinators, 80% of pollinators in the US have disappeared. Why? Because of the heavy use of pesticide and insecticide, which of course in India also we use a lot. What will happen if there are no pollinators? You're not going to have plants that can grow. Everything will suffer, agriculture will suffer. So sometimes because we think we are evolved and we do things because we think this is going to help us in a particular way, we don't realize the effect that we are having on the rest of the environment and the planet. So this is why One Health means that we have to think of all holistically. Yes, so this just shows that we are all interdependent. If we get rid of all our forests, we will not be able to survive. Without trees, there will be no oxygen, and rain. We know that when you deforest a particular area, the rainfall also suffers in that area. The rainfall goes down, and ultimately you result in water shortage. So these are some examples of why this interaction, human-environment interaction, it could be a problem, but it actually should not be a problem. It should be a positive for us. Heat stress. Heat stress, particularly in cities, is called the urban heat island effect because we put a lot of concrete. We have moved away from our traditional ways of building houses. Everything is now built with glass, concrete, because that's the model we saw in the West. That actually traps the heat. And also when you get rid of greenery and you have a lot of built-up environment, it actually radiates heat at night. So if you look at satellite map and to see the spread of temperature over a geographic area, you will see the cities will be much hotter, 5 to 6 degrees hotter than a rural area which may be 20 or 30 kilometers away. Within city also, you will see that certain parts of the city may be the more affluent parts which have more greenery, more lawns, gardens, open spaces. Temperature there is a few degrees lower than the parts of the city which are highly built up or highly industrialized. So as the temperature increases, we have to really rethink how our cities are being designed and built. And research from Bangalore, the IIHS, they showed that if you have blue-green spaces, just putting water bodies and greenery significantly reduce the temperature at the level of the. The other thing is the kind of roofing, the kind of house, and the kind of ventilation. You'll see a lot of the poorer people living in sheds which have a tin roof or some kind of metallic sheet. There actually the temperature inside is higher than the temperature outside quite often. It is about 4 to 5 degrees centigrade higher. And at night time it does not cool down. That is actually very, very harmful for health. So then we know livestock and poultry can spread zoonotic diseases. Pesticides, we talked about the killing off of pollinators, but pesticide residues on the food that we eat is also harming us. It's chemicals. Forest loss leads to biodiversity decline. Of course, pollution can affect not only air but water and ecosystems. And all this ultimately puts our health at risk, humans. So we actually need to take an interest in this. It's not just about other species, it's about us. So this is the definition of One Health I was asking in the beginning. It's just a connected approach. The other important thing is it focuses on prevention rather than treatment. So as doctors, most of us are used to seeing patients who are already sick then you start giving some medication. This approach actually says, let's prevent diseases by looking at the root cause and trying to address that. It encourages collaboration across health, veterinary, forestry, and environmental sectors. It helps tackle diseases that spread between animals and humans, and it addresses things like antimicrobial resistance and food safety. Because we know that food-borne infections is also a major cause of morbidity, particularly in developing countries, and particularly for young children, and it supports long-term health. So, the One Health actually has been talked about now for about, maybe 20, 30 years, or could be a little bit longer, when people started realizing that these things are connected, especially after the SARS-1 took place in 2003. And then avian flu happened in 2009, then there was more of a realization that, these things seem to be happening more frequently. What is going wrong? And, the link between the SARS-1, the SARS-2, which is COVID, and Ebola and things like that, is basically the handling of meat or handling of live animals. In China, they have the live animal market, where both domesticated animals, like you'll get, of course, your chicken and your mutton and things like that, but you'll also get a whole range of wildlife that is either legally or illegally being sold over there for meat. So in one market, you'll have a lot of animals and birds and reptiles and everything, and they're all alive. So they're not dead, and they're sold like that, or they're killed just before selling. So that actually it encourages the viruses to cross between species, because these animals are under stress and they are kept in very close proximity. So you can imagine that viruses could easily spread, and that is how we believe that COVID-19 started in a wet market in Wuhan, and initially jumped from some animal species, we still don't know which one, to a human being, and it had acquired enough mutations to be able to transmit from human to human, and then it becomes an epidemic. Because zoonotic infections, if it is coming from an animal to a human and it stops there, only that one person becomes sick. But if that virus gets the ability to go from human to human, particularly by airborne, then it becomes an epidemic, or it could even become a pandemic. So this is what happens for influenza also. If you see now in the US, the avian influenza is circulating among cattle farms. Many cattle farms across US have got flu. The cattle have obviously got it from birds. So that avian influenza is now able to happily spread amongst cattle, which is also a mammal. So it's a matter of time before that particular virus picks up one more mutation and jumps. It is jumping from cattle to human, but sporadic cases. That human to human transmission, if it happens, that could be actually the beginning of next pandemic. So this is why it's extremely worrying also to see that the public health systems in the US now are being actually weakened. The CDC and the NIH and many of the systems that were in place are actually now being sort of curtailed. And of course, support to the WHO has also been withdrawn by the US. So that is all very risky for global health, because global health depends on collaboration. It depends on sharing of data, sharing of resources, sharing of information, as well as sharing of the health products. Like in COVID, we needed to produce but also share the vaccines, the diagnostics, everything, and the knowledge that we were gaining about the virus. Without that kind of global sharing, you cannot control a pandemic. So this is really the worry for the future if we're not able to really address that. So as far as One Health is concerned, FAO, that's a Food and Agriculture Organization, WHO, World Health Organization, the UNEP, which is United Nations Environment Program, and the OIE, Organization for Animal Health, it's called World organization for animal health now. These four have come together. They call themselves quadripartite, and they actually said that One Health should be handled collectively at the global level by these four organizations. And they have also set up a high-level expert panel in 2021, and that panel has been making recommendations. So if you take the example of Nipah virus, which of course all of you are very familiar with, but it also occurs in Bangladesh, it occurs in Malaysia. But in each case, you can see that it's a slightly different mode of transmission. In the case of Malaysia, it's a contaminated fruit which is eaten by the pig, and it's transmitting pig to pig, and then suddenly it jumps pig to human. In the case of India and Bangladesh, it's the raw date palm sap. And in the case of Philippines, it could be horses that are involved. So this requires a lot of in-depth epidemiological investigation to find out what is the transmission pathway and the route. Because otherwise there is sort of unnecessary panic, but there's also actions taken which may not be very helpful. Next. Okay, I think we can move on. Next one. So, yeah, so I think I've already mentioned that most of the new infections are actually coming. In the last century, 75% of new infections in humans have come from animals. But we also have things like air pollution that's causing a lot of deaths in India. It is estimated to account for about 18% of deaths are because of the risk of being exposed to air pollution. Antibiotic use in animals accounts for 70% of the antimicrobial consumption. So while Kerala has an excellent program of antimicrobial resistance by really ensuring that nobody can buy an antibiotic without a prescription, I think it's a very, very positive step, and it's the only state where this is enforced so that there is no misuse, overuse, self-medication of antibiotics. However, the use of antibiotics in the animal sector, the fisheries sector, aquaculture, veterinary, agriculture, this also needs to be similarly scrutinized and controlled, because a lot of farmers may be using antibiotics without even knowing that they're using it. They put it in the feed as growth promoters. It's given to poultry, given to livestock, and put in aquaculture farms. So that is more dangerous because it is small doses of antibiotics, and you put it there, the bacteria in the environment or in the water, they're going to develop resistance, and the same bacteria, when it infects humans, we will not be able to treat it with those antibiotics. So certain antibiotics should be reserved for use only in humans, should be completely banned from use in animals. And the use of antibiotics in general should be, so I think that could be the next step for Kerala, is really looking at those sectors and reducing antibiotic use and giving alternatives. In fact, Ayurveda has been shown to be a good alternative even for treatment of animal infections. So one can actually reduce antibiotics and promote that kind of approach using, but it needs research, it needs documentation. Okay, next. Leptospirosis, another example, has been increasing year to year. This is spread through the urine of contaminated, which contaminates the water. So wherever there is water stagnation and people are exposed to that water, could be in the cities, it could be in the farms, you get outbreaks of leptospirosis, and it's a terrible infection, and it can also cause liver failure and bleeding and death. So again, this is increasing because of many factors actually coming together now. Next. Okay, Guillain-Barré syndrome, another recent example. You may have read in the newspapers that there was these cases happening in Pune, people coming in with paralysis in the hospital. Nobody knew what was happening. 1, 2, 3 case, then 50, 100. So Guillain-Barré syndrome is something, it's an autoimmune disease. It does occur from time to time. Of course, it is not unusual. But to come as a cluster, that is very unusual. And it took a long time actually for the authorities to investigate and find out whether it is linked to water, that's linked to the consumption of chicken. there are only two sources, either from chicken or from water, so you have to quickly find out. So the very fact that 3 or 4 or 5 cases of this disease occurred together within a matter of few days should have triggered an investigation looking at both water and chicken as potential sources, and it could have actually prevented this from becoming a big outbreak. So it requires not only training and that capacity at the district level with good, well-trained epidemiologists who can do that investigation, but it also requires doctors and healthcare providers to think proactively when they see something unusual. And in Kerala, again, you know, maybe because of the experience, etc., they are much more aware, so that the Nipah cases, the way they get picked up, you know, in 2018, 19, 20, 21, with a single first case itself picked up and then action taken to prevent onward spread. That shows, you know, that the whole system is functioning very well. It's not just the health care system, it is also the livestock and the veterinary people and the forest people. They all work together actually to do the investigation and to take the preventive action and shut down the further transmission. So that kind of team approach where different departments come together and act, that is very important for One Health. Food safety is another, so we've already talked about these, but these are the factors I mentioned in the beginning, no? Why did we get COVID, and why do we think we will get more frequently pandemics? It's because of climate change, expanding the habitat for vectors, urban expansion, we are growing, getting closer to forest, going into the forest, cutting the forest, intensive animal farming, the overuse of antibiotics is fueling antimicrobial resistance, global travel. Today, anything starts in one corner of the world, within 24 to 36 hours, it has gone fully around the world. You cannot stop it. That is the extent of air travel today. So this is why it's even more important to be able to stop the outbreak locally, because once it has gone out from there, you remember during COVID we had these variants, alpha, beta, gamma, delta, all that, and Omicron, of course. Now every time there would be a new variant, what would countries do? They'll all react by shutting their borders. Say, okay, let's close our borders. Not realizing the virus is much faster than them, you know. It takes human beings 2 to 3 weeks to react. First you have to do the sequencing, then you have to find out it's a new variant, then you have to, WHO will say this is a variant of concern, then the government will act. By that time the virus has already gone on many planes and gone to all parts of the world. So, none of that, those kind of measures actually stopped any of the variants from spreading to any of the countries. What happened was there was a huge damage to the economy, especially those countries that, like Omicron, the entire southern Africa, most of the high-income countries stopped travel and trade from South Africa, Namibia, and Botswana, and so on for a matter of about a month. They suffered a huge economic damage as a result of that. And in fact, the president of South Africa at that time, he questioned why they should come with data and be transparent if that's going to be the reaction of the other countries. So this is why we need that international health regulations which clearly spell out what actions are needed to protect people's health, but where there should be caution so that we don't overdo it. Even in India, when we had plague in Surat, there was a huge drop in tourist arrivals. It does result in economic impact. So that's why it's important also from the economy point of view to control these things and to prevent them. And then deforestation. So these are the risk factors, and these are all increasing. So this is why our risk is increasing. Okay, I think we talked about zoonotic diseases. We know what it is. Next. Antimicrobial resistance also I have mentioned already. So it requires coordination. The last point, if you see, it requires not only regulation at one level in terms of hospitals and pharmacies, but it requires action through all of the other, in animals and agriculture, etc., and regular surveillance. We do have hospital-based surveillance, but we do not have community-based surveillance for antibiotic resistance, and also in animals. So, okay, so we've talked about pollution. climate change, the waste from both farms and hospitals can carry drug-resistant microbes into the environment. Contaminated soil and water can spread zoonotic diseases to communities. So protecting the environment is essential to prevent future health threats. So again, safe food systems are very important, and whether it's plants, we know that, for example, groundnuts and even millets, they get contaminated by a fungus which produces aflatoxin, and if you consume that, it's very dangerous for health. So it depends on how you are storing some of the products after they are harvested. Similarly, poor hygiene during farming or during transport or during cooking increases the foodborne illness. Antibiotic residues, use of pesticides and chemicals, we still don't know the extent to which those things are impacting us. I'm sure Dr. Pillai also would have mentioned that they have a role in the increasing incidence of cancer. So again, the action has to be throughout the food chain, right from the producer to whoever's handling it, whether it's industrial or at home or in the restaurant, to the consumer. And this, of course, applies to water also. So maybe we don't have to go into a lot of detail, but India does now have a One Health mission. There is a ministerial, interdepartmental coordination there. Principal Scientific Advisor's office is the one who coordinates it. There are state-level initiatives like Kerala's and Tamil Nadu. Of course, there's also more research, and then there's community. So we'll quickly go through a few slides here. Next one. Yeah. So these are the different departments which have come together. Next. And yeah, I've already mentioned these are the ministries: Animal Husbandry, Environment, Agriculture, ICMR, and Health. Next. And each one has certain activities that they do. Now the issue here is, of course, that everybody does their activities, but that is not enough. That they've been doing for a long time. What is now different is that they come together to share the data. So animal husbandry has to share data with health, health has to share it with forest, and so on. So when you're doing wildlife surveillance, if the forest department is doing it, that data should be available also to the health department. Then only they can know how much of certain infections are circulating in the wildlife. Recently, ICMR has set up a study in 3 states to look at wetlands where there are a lot of migratory birds that are coming. And Kerala also, we keep having this H5N1, and then we have to cull a lot of ducks or chicken. So doing surveillance round the year in those places where there are migratory birds and domestic birds will give us advance warning of the infections that could be circulating, and also testing the human beings who work in that environment. Next. Yeah, okay, so there's guidance to states and all that. This is more for government, how to organize the One Health program. Next. So I wanted to give an example from our foundation on how we worked with the fishing community. Actually, the fishermen after tsunami, they were very scared to go into the ocean. And because they were really traumatized and so many people had lost their lives. So we came up with this mobile app that we worked on with INCOIS, which is a part of the Ministry of Earth Sciences, and Qualcomm supported. And it is called the Fisher Friendly mobile application. It is available in 9 languages, all the coastal states, and over 1.2 lakh fishermen are using it. Over the last 10 years, it is added so many additional points. The fishermen would come and say, we want to, of course, they want to know the weather, they want to know the wind, they want to know what it is going to be like in the ocean over the next couple of days, whether it is safe or not for them to go. Where is the fish likely to be concentrated, what's temperature of the water, etc. But also where are the boundaries, for example, the India-Sri Lanka border or Bangladesh, so that they don't go in beyond the national borders and they get arrested. Then the state government of Orissa asked us to put an alert for them when they approach the turtle nesting site, so that they don't come close to those beaches. So over a period of time, the functions of this app have grown based on the feedback coming from the fishermen. So I think it's a very good example of a tool that is developed not top-down, but really by a bottom-up approach, participatory approach, and it has been refined over a period of time. And now the latest addition, they want to know where is the ghost gear. As you know, ghost gear is the waste, the old fishing nets are thrown into the ocean, and they are very dangerous. They catch the large animals, the turtles, the sharks, the dolphins, etc. Many animals die because they get caught in those discarded fishing nets. So now there's a program for the fishermen to actually retrieve and bring back those fishing nets. So that function is going to be added on here. So this can be further refined, and now East Africa is very interested actually in collaborating with us and taking this technology. Next. And then we decided that for women also we have to do something, because women are the ones who are actually doing the post-harvest marketing of the fish. Again, the food handling is very important. How are they handling it? As you know, dried fish, karuvada is a delicacy, but the way that dried fish is made is unhygienic. So we have given them solar dryers. We've also given training on how to use this phones, etc., to connect to the market. They can get better prices now. They can also, of course, get weather forecast, market information. And so many of the fisher women who have formed groups and fisher women companies are now actually earning a much better income because they are directly connected and they are doing online marketing of their products. Next. Next. So, Honorable Chief Minister launched the Kerala One Health program in 22, May 22, and it was initially piloted and then across the state, because Kerala was recognized that it's at high risk actually for these issues because of the high forest cover, the human-animal interface, also the higher NCD burden, more of diabetes, hypertension, that makes people more vulnerable also to the complications of infectious diseases, and a history of many zoonotic infections in the past. Next. So there's a Center of One Health that is being established, but already many elements have been operationalized. Next. So the idea is really to create the knowledge hubs for outbreak, build both national and international collaborations, have IT-enabled surveillance, promote community-based disease surveillance. Again, Kerala very strong in the community-based systems, the panchayats. And the local governance is strong, and therefore this can happen. And strengthening labs. So again, the Institute of Virology has been developed, diagnostic infrastructure, and then empower the local self-groups and reduce the burden of antimicrobial resistance. So this has been doing quite well. Of course, it is early days as yet to see the impact, but the establishment of the Kerala One Health Center for Nipah research in Kozhikode Medical College, that was another good move. And as you can see, the partners are all the ministries and departments that we talked about. Next one. Now, the role of panchayats and municipalities, in fact, and the public is important. So whenever you notice anything unusual, like a cluster of deaths or some animals dying, that needs to get reported. It's good to have awareness programs on things like safe food practices, hygiene, sanitation and waste disposal. Of course, with growing population, I think waste disposal is a huge issue all over India, particularly in our urban areas. So really solid waste management, and particularly now there's a lot of technology to actually convert that waste into something useful, which you can also use it either as fertilizer or convert it to energy. Clean drinking water supply, sanitation, animal vaccination. You see, rabies is another issue which is very much present. And I was quite surprised. I recently saw a statistic that over 40 people had died of rabies in Tamil Nadu alone, in the last couple of years. So it is not something which makes the headlines, but the animal vaccination program would be highly effective. You see, it costs very little to vaccinate dogs, but once somebody gets rabies, firstly, it's very difficult to treat, and of course, it's much more expensive. So again, prevention is usually better than cure, but it means that you need a proper, well-planned out program. And communicating the health risks and plans to citizens in simple local language. As you remember, during COVID, there was a lot of misinformation, disinformation, rumors, things are spreading on WhatsApp. So during a crisis situation, I think that very credible and sound health information to be given to it has to be done by government, because government is the one that people will trust, but people also trust local leaders, maybe the local panchayat leader or a religious leader or the ASHA worker or somebody who they have faith in. Those are the people who should really be communicating the health risks. Next. Yeah, so some of the things that community can do is report sick animals, keep your environment clean, use antibiotics responsibly, don't unnecessarily ask and use antibiotics, limit the pesticide use, and practice food and water safety. Be the first informants, always. Don't wait for somebody else to go and inform. Use trusted voices in the communities, and also promoting cultural and local channels for spreading this type of information as part of a cultural program or community radio, etc. These kind of messages could be useful. Okay, we can go ahead. Next. Yeah, again, we could have One Health clubs in schools and colleges and have competitions, kits, etc. on some of these topics, because One Health sometimes cannot be understood, so maybe it has to be broken down into smaller pieces which are more easily understood and which are more practical for people also. So training teachers and having this type of eco clubs in every school would be a good way, because I think environmental awareness today is extremely important for youth. And it's not just because we want them to be depressed or scared or unhappy about what is happening to environment, but what are the positive things that we can do actually to make our environment better. And students, when they share messages at home, it is more effective than anybody else. Like for example, for tobacco control, it is well known that if a child comes and tells a parent, please don't smoke because it is bad for my health, you're spoiling my health by smoking, that has much more powerful impact if a parent is a smoker than any number of billboards or other messages telling that person to stop smoking. Next. Yeah, so farming communities also can do a lot, particularly the awareness needs to go up. Are they using antibiotics? Why are they using it for prevention? What kind of hygiene practices they can follow? I mentioned heat as a big threat, ensuring the safe disposal of animal waste, and so on, clean water sources. Yeah. So I think I'm just coming to the end here, just to show some examples of work that we do. This is from the Kulli Hills. And again, this is a tribal area in Tamil Nadu. And we're looking at integrated agroforestry. Took an area which was very degraded and barren, and it's been converted into fertile land. You have to attend to water, you have to attend to the soil, you have to know what kind of crops are most suited for that particular agroecology, and you have to train the women and men in different livelihoods so that they can increase their incomes. Next. Yeah, this is another example of coastal agroecosystems where you can do fish as well as agriculture, livestock, and so on. Next. And this is greening, reviving biodiversity. And again, the Western Ghats here in Kerala, one of the biodiversity hotspots in the world, which means that very rich in biodiversity, but also under threat, because also very heavily populated. So hotspot means that it's got the potential and the huge biodiversity, but high risk of losing it. And so we need to do everything possible to preserve, because that biodiversity is what has given us in the past medicines. We have got so much from that biodiversity. If we lose it, and this includes agricultural biodiversity, the type of varieties of tubers that I see when I go to Wayanad, the varieties of rice, local paddy varieties, the varieties of banana. One farmer came with 75 varieties of banana. And Dioscorea, the kind of tubers that they're growing in the wild over there. The wild mushrooms, the wild leafy green vegetables, all those, actually we are losing the knowledge, and we are also losing the communities that used to really protect those. Next. So that's the last, I think that's the last slide. So it's just about, what everyone can do really in your own individual capacity. But I think most important is health literacy, health awareness, understanding biology. I think there are some science students here. in the audience, and the science students need to educate others in the community so that people don't believe in irrational things or superstitions, but really on scientific facts. I think that's the last slide. More? Okay, just last few pictures. These are only pictures. So I talked about the biodiversity of Wayanad. You can see, because we have a center in Kalpetta, the Community Agro-Biodiversity Center. Look at the variety of pulses, bananas, yams, wild and cultivated. The next. And this I'm very proud of, that these are our first 12 Pania youth who have been trained as conservation stewards. They have got green skills now. They'll be getting a diploma very soon from the Transdisciplinary University. And look at them. They are, maybe 10th, 11th pass kids, but now they are going to be the eco champions actually for that district. They got trained in different places, including in Auroville. They went to Malabar Botanical Garden, Gurukula, etc. They had both classroom as well as a lot of practical training. They're going to be now the nursery managers and the eco-restoration of the destroyed areas of Wayanad mountains after the landslide last year. They will participate in those activities. So we want to expand this program much more. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, madam, for that wonderful lecture. Such a beautiful, holistic approach towards One Health, right? I just wanted to make two remarks. One is, I think it was a very humbling experience to listen to you. Living in times when the human being is thinking that everything is under his control, with a lot of advances that have happened in technology and the electronic gadgets that we carry, where we think that the world is at our fingertips. I think you made us very gently realize that the presence or absence of a meager element of nature, like an insect or a butterfly, could decide whether the human being can remain alive and healthy or not. മലയാളത്തിൽ പറഞ്ഞാൽ വളരെ എന്താ പറയുക, വിനയത്തോടു കൂടി കാണേണ്ട ഒരു കോൺസെപ്റ്റാണ് മാഡം നമുക്ക് തന്നത്. നമ്മൾ ഒരു മനുഷ്യൻ എന്നുള്ള നിലയിൽ ഈ ലോകത്തിനെ മുഴുവൻ കീഴടക്കാനുള്ള എല്ലാ സാങ്കേതിക വിദ്യകളും ഈ മൊബൈൽ പോലത്തെ ഒരു ഇലക്ട്രോണിക് ഗാഡ്ജറ്റ് ഉള്ളത് കൊണ്ട് നമ്മളെ വിരൽത്തുമ്പിലാണ് ലോകം എന്നൊക്കെ വിശ്വസിച്ച് മേ ബി നമ്മൾ വല്ലാതെ അങ്ങ് അഹങ്കരിക്കുന്ന ഒരു കാലഘട്ടത്തിലേ ഒരു പ്രാണിയോ ഒരു പൂമ്പാറ്റയോ ഒരു ചിത്രശലഭമോ തീരുമാനിക്കും നമ്മൾ ആരോഗ്യത്തോടെ ഈ ലോകത്ത് ജീവിക്കാൻ പറ്റുമോ ഇല്ലയോ എന്നുള്ളത്. And the other point which I wanted to make is, I've become an even firm believer now in genetics and how genes can be so magical. Mangomba Sambashivan Swaminathan, he was an Indian geneticist, a plant breeder, you could call him an administrator, but most importantly he was a humanitarian. When the entire world was focused on something else and all that, this particular person dedicated all his efforts to work on paddy, on how a low-income farmer could have a variety of paddy with which he could make a living. And it is not incidental that such a wonderful orator, an inspiring personality who has actually given us such a holistic approach, happens to be that wonderful person's daughter. So I am sure that from some other world, he would be watching and feeling very, very proud of this daughter. മലയാളത്തിൽ പറഞ്ഞാൽ മങ്കൊമ്പ് സാംബശിവൻ സ്വാമിനാഥൻ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ ഒരു ഇന്ത്യൻ ജനറ്റിസിസ്റ്റ്. ഓക്കെ, ഈ നെല്ലിന്റെ പല വെറൈറ്റികൾ കണ്ടെത്താൻ വേണ്ടിയും അതിലെന്താണ് ജനിതകമായ ഒരു വ്യത്യാസം വരുത്തിയാൽ എങ്ങനെയാണ് സാമ്പത്തികമായി പിന്നോക്കം നിൽക്കുന്ന ഒരു കർഷകനും എങ്ങനെ അവന്റെ വിളവ് ഉൽപാദനം കൂട്ടാം എന്ന് ചിന്തിച്ചൊരു മനുഷ്യൻ. മറ്റ് ലോകത്തിലെ പലരും വേറെ പല വലിയ വലിയ കാര്യങ്ങളും ചർച്ച ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരുന്ന കാലത്ത് നമ്മുടെ നാടിന് ഏറ്റവും വേണ്ട ഒരു കാര്യത്തെക്കുറിച്ച് ചിന്തിച്ചൊരു മനുഷ്യനാണ്. അപ്പോൾ ആ മനുഷ്യൻ്റെ ജനിതകമായ ഘടന, ആ മനുഷ്യൻ്റെ ജീൻസ് സ്വന്തമാക്കിക്കൊണ്ട് ഉണ്ടാവുന്ന ഒരു പേഴ്സണാലിറ്റി ഭയങ്കര എന്താ പറയുക പ്രചോദനം നൽകുന്ന ഒരു വ്യക്തി തന്നെയായി മാറണ്ടേ. അപ്പോൾ അങ്ങനത്തെ ഒരു മാജിക്കൽ പേഴ്സൻ്റെ ഒരു ലെക്ചറാണ് നമ്മളിന്ന് കേട്ടത്. നമുക്ക് ഇത്രയും നല്ലൊരു ധാരണ ഈ വിഷയത്തെപ്പറ്റി ഉണ്ടാക്കി തന്നു എന്നുള്ളത് വളരെ വളരെ സന്തോഷം നൽകുന്ന ഒരു ഘടകമാണ്. നമ്മളെല്ലാം we all look at hill stations and probably think of how beautiful is the climate there, how we can go and take a trip and go and enjoy there. But you look at the climate there, the climate change there. What are the communicable diseases that can spread there? And probably you're thinking of making it a very wonderful environment for everybody to live. On that note, I think we would take the questions. There is a special prize for the person who asked the best question. So I think we have time for a few questions. Can we give a mic to the person who's asking?
Good evening, madam. I'm Dr. Jayasurian Venginat. It is an excellent presentation on One Health. Many of us not aware of the importance of One Health, but your presentation really given a clear to every one of us. My question is, it is the high time to think of One Health. To get One Health, our present education system has to be changed. It is to change from childhood education onwards to realize the importance of importance. Madam, do you think in our country it is lagging a lot? What we have to improve upon only the realistic education to all citizens of one and all?
Thank you. I think that's a really good question. Yes, I think we have to do more because I think our students are not getting any practical experience and exposure. You know, everything is theoretically taught to them. So whether it is more of hands-on scientific experiments or actually exposure out, especially the kids who are growing up in the cities, you know, how much do they really know about biodiversity, whether it is urban or rural biodiversity? I think even a kid growing up in Chennai or any other coastal town, do they really understand what is the ecology of the coast and what should be, you know, I have learnt a lot in the last, even though I'm a medical doctor, so I did not study these things in detail. Now I go and I talk to farmers, I talk to fisherwomen, I talk to fishermen. I'm understanding so much more, you know, what the challenges are and how our concept of development is actually ruining their livelihoods and the way in which traditionally they lived in harmony. And today we build massive ports, massive infrastructure that interrupts the tides, it interrupts the way in which the sea used to flow, and that's why we are seeing all this coastal erosion today. So I think if we just need to take a step back and ask them, you know, because they have the traditional wisdom and knowledge. But those of us who have educated a lot, we think that we know all the answers. So my father used to use a word called eco-technology. He said the traditional wisdom or the ecological prudence combined with the modern tools and technology, only that can actually help solve our problems. So yes, the answer is we need to bring in much more practical exposure into our education system.
My name is Premarajan. I'm a retired teacher. So, madam, you were explaining about the environmental awareness. But I think the whole universe is a complex system. You agree? And life itself is an emergent property of this complex system. And there is a system dynamics working behind it. The awareness of environment has to be based on the in-depth knowledge of this complex system dynamics. Personally, in my opinion, the world is more oriented. Perhaps the global economy is more profit oriented. It has to be welfare oriented. Am I right? It has to be welfare oriented. Only in such a condition, the prevailing synchrony of the living world can be maintained. So how to achieve that goal in this confusing global world?
Thank you. I think you answered your own question. In the words of Mahatma Gandhi, he said the world or nature has enough for everybody's need, but not for everybody's greed. So basically, if we all take only what we need and we live within that we used to in the past, I don't think there's any problem. We won't be really intruding on other species or damaging the environment as much as we are doing now, but we have all become greedy. And so you are absolutely right. We have to rethink. And even the way we measure our progress, GDP, but if that GDP is going to be achieved at the expense of the environment and our quality of life, then is that really a measure of progress? Or should we use a more holistic measure of development?
Thank you. Since we have time constraints, I think we have time for just one more question. I request the person specific to the point. Tell your name before you ask the question.
Okay, I'm Roshni. It's an outstanding presentation, ma'am. It's a privilege to be here. My concern is we conduct all this research ultimately for human health and survival. Improving health reduces the death rate and increases the population. Then there is a limit to space available for living and increased waste also. Then human grows the forest for this. Isn't our real problem is an overpopulation of human?
Thank you. Also very good question. Definitely the population pressure is a huge problem, but luckily in the last several decades, I think our measures to promote family planning, but also to improve the survival of children. In the early days, people used to have 7, 8, 9 children and 2 used to survive. Now you have 2 children, both are likely to survive because of vaccines and so many other things that have improved healthcare. So the world's population is still going up, but the rate of growth has slowed. And by 2050 or 60, it's going to plateau and then it's going to start coming down. So by 2100, the world is going to go up to above 9 billion, but then it's going to be back to 7 billion. So many countries today are worried that their population growth is negative. And India, as you know, total fertility rate 2.1 at the national level, but much lower in states like Kerala, Tamil Nadu, etc. So today, I think population growth is, yes, existing. We have a huge population, no doubt. And that is a challenge to cater to all their needs. But we don't have to worry that we're still growing and what are we going to do? So that has stabilized. Most important is equity today, I think. We need to really ensure that everybody has access to a good quality of life, not just few.
Thank you so much, madam. I think for time constraints, I think we move on to the prize-winning question and a memento to be handed over.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. We do have time constraints, and we are honored as you took time and pain to come over here and share your insights. On behalf of Peruma Talks, I invite Srimati Usha Nandiniyar, the chairperson of Peruma Talks committee, to present a memento to the chief guest of the program. I invite Dr. Soumya Swaminathan to receive the memento on behalf of Peruma Talks. We are extremely happy to have the wonderful moderator we have with us, Dr. Shaijas P. And I invite General Convener of Pinrai Peruma to present the memento to moderator, Dr. Shaijas P.
Pinrai Peruma.
One more prize, ma'am. It's our responsibility to take you safely to the international airport, and we have got the result of the best questionnaire, and the best questionnaire award goes to Dr. Jayasurya Vengilat. So I invite Dr. Jayasurya to receive the memento from Chief Guest Dr. Soumya Swaminathan. Thank you, moderator. Thank you, one and all, who took pain and time to be part of this program. Thank you.
Pinarai Peruma.
Thank you so much. Such a pleasure.